and I'll do the very best I can if I'm fortunate enough to win today.
How do you consider a great opportunity? There's tremendous enthusiasm from everybody. You see it all over the country.
There is a clear choice in this election between strong, steady leadership or a loose cannon who could put everything at risk.
Hillary Clinton is the most corrupt person ever to seek the office of the presidency of the United States.
It is just a little past 7 o'clock in the East, and we welcome you back to continuing coverage here on Newsmax TV of America Votes 2016. I'm J.D. Hayworth. Now, as we mentioned before the break, 7 states closed their polls at 7 o'clock in the East. Those states are Alabama, most of Florida, though the west coast of Florida will close up at 8 o'clock Eastern Time, Georgia, New Hampshire, South Carolina, Vermont, and Virginia. That critical swing state of North Carolina, the other critical swing state of Ohio and West Virginia will close up on the half hour at 7:30 Eastern Time. So we are in the process of getting the results, getting the returns, and passing them along to you, but there is something you can do for us. Because you see, here at Newsmax, we just want to know, who did you vote for? And you can tell us now by logging on to newsmaxpolls.com and almost voting a second time, just telling us who you voted for in this 2016 presidential election. Well, let's bring in a couple of guests to talk about what we may see later this evening. And first, we welcome via Skype from Austin, Texas, Democratic strategist J.D. Gins. I love his first name. I may not totally agree with his politics, but J.D., it's great to have you. And from Holland, Michigan, my old congressional colleague, fellow member of the Republican Conference a couple of decades ago, and former chairman of the House Intelligence Committee, Pete Hoekstra. Pete, of course, is now a Shillman Senior Fellow on the Investigative Project on Terrorism. He is also the author of Architects of Disaster, The Destruction of Libya. Pete, let me turn to you first, because there you are in Michigan. That is one of the states the Trump campaign wants to flip from blue to red. In your estimation, since you have been on the ground with Mr. Trump, will that happen tonight?
I think it's a very good possibility, J.D., that you will see Michigan flip into the red column for the first time since 1988. Donald Trump closed out, the day before the election into Election Day here in West Michigan, drawing about 12 to 13,000 people at 1 o'clock in the morning for that rally. But more importantly, today we're seeing record numbers of what appear to be record number of voters going into the polls in places like Macomb County, which is Reagan Democrats. Here in West Michigan, my son just spent an hour in line to vote. We don't usually have lines in West Michigan. This is a Republican stronghold. Voting appears to be down in Detroit. So, yeah, I think it's a real possibility that tonight we're going to see Michigan go red.
Well, gentlemen, let me offer some projections that have come from one of the cable networks. Fox News now projects that Donald Trump has won the states of Indiana and Kentucky. Fox further projects that Democrat Hillary Clinton prevails tonight in Vermont. And with that bit of news from the Democrat side of the aisle, let me welcome in a guy with a great first name, J.D. Gins. Good to have you there in Austin, Texas. And walk me through this, Brother J.D., because, you know, about 10 days ago, we heard how the Democrat map was going to expand to include the Lone Star State, that Hillary was running strong, and yet in this final week, it was Trump trying to expand the map and Hillary returning to states that were Democrat strongholds. So in your home state of Texas, is that an indication that that's going to stay in the Republican column, J.D.?
Well, I don't know if we're going blue, but I think we're certainly trying on purple right now. Austin, by 4 o'clock this afternoon, had already had more voters vote than the entire election last time, and we got big lines here. And we've seen in counties like Hidalgo, which are strongly Hispanic, had more people vote by early voting ending than even at all in 2012 or 2008. Now, I think that's strong turnout. I think Texas is trending blue, But I think if you want to see a state that might flip, it's looking like we might be able to flip Arizona, where, again, Hispanic turnout is strong. And we see Hispanic turnout strong in parts of Florida and Nevada, which I think those states really matter. And I think it's some wishful thinking if you think those Hispanic voters are turning out for Donald Trump.
All right, brother JD, let me just, as a guy who used to represent Arizona in the Congress of the United States and still some kinfolk out there voting, I can tell you, I believe the Grand Canyon state is going to stay in the Republican column, but good people can disagree. To you both, gents, and to you at home, let's talk about something else that's going on, something called Votecaster, a data firm shaking up the way election results are reported with real-time estimates and exit interviews, even though they say it's not strictly a scientific projection tonight. What's interesting, our parent website, Newsmax.com, reports early on, based on Votecaster, Hillary Clinton is leading in the 7 swing states they're tracking, which include Iowa, Nevada, Ohio, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Florida, and New Hampshire. But those margins are very narrow. Brother Pete, not to disparage Votecaster, but a lot of folks back in 1936, I was the Literary Digest poll pitting Alf Landon against FDR, and we know where that turned out. What is most important tonight, even as we try to get a clue from exit interviews like Votecaster and the other networks projecting, what is going to be the key indication for you tonight that the campaign or the presidency will go one way or the other, Pete?
Well, I think the real indicator for me is, okay, what's happening in New Hampshire with real vote totals and real votes coming in, not Votecaster. I think in many ways, I don't know a lot about this group. From what I've seen, it looks more like an influence operation than a legitimate polling effort to give you unbiased indications of where the race may be heading. But take a look at what's happening in New Hampshire. If Trump's doing well in New Hampshire, then I think Trump can have a very, very good night. That's where I'm looking.
Well, let me just put in a word, not to be totally skeptical of Votecaster, because what we have seen in terms of intensity, in terms of response, it certainly has a place, even if the methodology departs from what we've seen with traditional polling. Now, speaking of the genuine polls, let's go to the battle-born state of Nevada, where it appeared this afternoon that there might be a legal battle in that state. J.D. Gins, the Trump campaign, went in and said, hey, wait a minute. There was an early polling place in Clark County there in Las Vegas that stayed open close till 10 p.m. And there were some other questions about what happened. And in fact, the people in line were not there before the standard closing time at 7 p.m. We've heard other situations developing in Nevada in previous campaigns. The judge threw that out. Can you explain why Nevada and Clark County undergo such scrutiny, J.D.?
Well, yeah, because Nevada's a swing state, and Clark County is Las Vegas, and if turnout is high there, Democrats are likely going to win the state. So I think if Donald Trump was feeling good about Nevada, they wouldn't be in the court challenging the voter turnout, which everybody knows is through the roof. This isn't outside of just one day. The trend has been off the charts in some of these states, and these are Hispanic voters turning out. Now, if you're shocked that you could run a campaign for 18 months villainizing Hispanics and then see record Hispanic turnout happen in places like Nevada, then you're not really paying attention. It's wishful thinking that that vote is anything other than Democratic turnout.
Well,
but people were, and the judge did toss that out.
Well, it's very curious. You brought up a couple of things that I want to get Pete's thoughts on, but we've seen in elections past, Pete, most notably 2010, the last time Harry Reid was on the ballot, where there were charges that, in fact, construction foremen on union jobs in Clark County brought their workers to the polls to vote early and stood there with them supervising what happens. There are real questions about Nevada's electoral integrity, Pete, are there not?
It appears that there are, J.D. We've heard these stories before. I've gotten some reports already from some friends of mine in different places in the country where there's voting irregularities. You know, again, we're not saying that this is influencing millions of votes, but in places like Nevada, in places like Rhode Island, you don't have to flip millions of votes. You maybe can flip, 5, 10, 15,000, maybe to influence who gets those electoral votes or who may win a congressional district. This is, I went in today, I voted, they checked my license, they ran it through an electronic system to verify that the license was actually, in the name of a registered voter. I can't understand why we can't have simple things like that on a nationwide basis, and why the Democrats continue to try to bar those kinds of just common sense items that you can put in to make sure you've got electoral security.
Well, speaking of security, secure always in his own opinions with incisive analysis, is my colleague here at Newsmax TV. Joining us again from Newsmax New York, it's Steve Malzberg, host of the eponymously named Steve Malzberg Show. Brother Steve, the subject we veered off to tonight as we continue to await results concerns the prospect of voter fraud. We have heard reports, in addition to the Trump situation trying to file suit in Nevada that was thrown out of court by a judge, we're hearing about some voting machines malfunctioning. Is that par for the course, Steve, or do we have reasons to be very skeptical? Got about a minute left in this segment, Steve.
Yeah, I mean, it's too early to tell. The latest report I just heard coming out of Durham, North Carolina, which is, by the way, 38% black and won by Barack Obama with 76% in both 08 and 012. They want to keep they're planning on keeping the voting going for an extra 90 minutes because of earlier computer irregularities. So, I don't know. It seems like a pretty Hillary-friendly area and district that they're going to keep open for 90 more minutes. So maybe, chalk that up to what you're talking about, or maybe it's legit.
Yeah, there have been problems through the years. J.D. Gins, could we all agree? Should we just go back to paper ballots? About 30 seconds for your answer, sir.
Well, I do think that paper ballots have a place in this election cycle. I think that if you see Donald Trump win, everyone's going to say, oh, it wasn't rigged. This is a boogeyman that the right likes to talk about. But what's going to win this election, if it's close, is ground game. Hillary Clinton's been building them in these states for 600+ days. So in the last 48 hours, they've contacted more than 14 million voters. This is something that Donald Trump can't buy. Republicans don't have. And if it's close and it's going to be one on the field, Hillary Clinton's going to win it, not because of voter fraud, but because of a stronger campaign.
And yet we even had the Washington Post reporting today about Donald Trump's surprisingly effective ground game. We'll see how it turns out. J.D. Gins tonight from Austin, Texas. J.D., thanks to you. Pete and Steve, hang around, and when we come back, Brother Gizzy, John Gizzy, our chief Washington correspondent, will offer his perspective. This is Newsmax TV's continuing coverage of America Votes 2016. We're coming right back.